Russia is reeling as Ukraine makes rapid advances in the country's east. You can see Ukrainian soldiers and civilians ripping up Russian flags in a recently liberated Ukrainian city. In September alone, Ukraine says it's recaptured 6,000 square kilometers of territory. The rapid counteroffensive east of Kharkiv has forced Russian soldiers to flee, many back across the border. And that's raising questions about Russia's senior military command and Vladimir Putin himself. Bill Browder is the head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. He's also CEO of Hermitage Capital. He's coming to us from London. Hi, Mr. Browder. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
How significant, from your perspective, is what Ukraine has done over the last number of days in reclaiming that territory?
Well, I think it's truly decisive in a number of different ways. First and foremost, it's a total morale boost for all Ukrainians, Ukrainian soldiers, etc. It shows that they have the capacity, even being outgunned and outmanned, to be able to achieve real military victories. It's a huge boost for the West that has been supplying billions of dollars of military aid to Ukraine, to see that that money is being used effectively. And it's a huge morale knock for Putin to see that even with all this stuff, his soldiers are, running scared. And I think that it's really a major turning point, particularly when the war looked like it was at a total stalemate. It looked, that the Russians were gaining maybe 1 kilometer a day, and now all of a sudden, thousands of kilometers have been freed up by the Ukrainians. But I should point out that as big as a deal as this is, and it is a big deal, it's still only a very small fraction of the territory that Russia has taken from Ukraine, and a lot more. We're talking about less than 10%. A lot more progress needs to be made if Ukraine really wants to expel Russia from all of the territory they've taken since the start of this war.
Beyond the physical limitations, what you just pointed out, though, I was wondering what your take is on the way in which this is being perceived in Russia, and in particular, the criticism for maybe one of the first times during this war that Putin is on the receiving end from voices in the media, from other politicians. How rare is that, and how significant is that from your perspective?
Well, I think this is the crux of the whole story. So if Putin were to lose the war in Ukraine, if the Ukrainians were to expel the Russian troops from its territory, the Russian people have no capacity for a loser. They need a strong man. They want a strong man. Putin did this to present himself as a strong man. If he's seen as being weak, that's the end of Putin. And so that creates a lot of different thoughts. One is that if we want to get rid of Putin, we need to keep supporting Ukraine until they push him out. But we also know that if Putin were to lose power, he probably ends up losing his life. And so for him, this is an existential threat. And so the way I know Putin, and I've been in my own conflict with him for 13 years, he doesn't do humiliation well. And I would expect that he will come back and triple or quadruple down in order to try to make a point. And how he does that could be very unpleasant for Ukraine and for the rest of us.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. To what degree do you expect him to retaliate? Because as you point out, that clearly will be his instinct.
That's going to be his instinct. He will retaliate. But then the question is, does he have the capacity to retaliate? So many troops have died. According to Ukrainian estimates, 50,000 Russian soldiers have died. Probably another 50,000 have been disabled. That is like a serious part of the fighting force. I'm not sure they have enough troops to do what they're supposed to be doing. On top of that, an enormous amount of Russian equipment has been destroyed. They've lost a lot of equipment in their retreat. And so Russia may not have the capacity to retaliate in the way that Putin wants to. And so it's hard to say. We've always overestimated Putin's abilities since the very first day of this war. And so, yes, he will retaliate. But the question is, does he have the capacity? Do they have enough troops? Do they have enough equipment? Do they know what they're doing? And will the Ukrainians be able to ward it off? And so, nothing is certain other than the fact that Putin is a very vindictive man and he can't show weakness, so he'll do something. But what that is and how effective it is to be seen.
The other part of this I think is important to note, and I think our viewers would be interested in, is the degree to which Western intelligence, in this specific instance, in the retaking of territory by Ukrainian forces most recently, has aided them in those endeavors, and how big a part Western intelligence is playing. What does that tell you?
Well, I think that the main thing that's happening here is Ukrainian bravery and the Ukrainian skill in fighting. I don't know the extent to which they even need Western intelligence to do this. I mean, they have a pretty good idea of where the ammunition dumps are and so on and so forth, and they've been targeting that. The main thing that's been helpful to the Ukrainians is to have the weapons, having the long-range missiles that can pinpoint and destroy ammunition depots, destroying bridges that the Russians are using to occupy the territory and things like that. I'm not specifically aware of where the intelligence fits in, but I think that the key thing that I can see is and the thing that the Ukrainians have been asking for and getting to a greater or lesser extent is the equipment. And we need to continue to supply the equipment. We need to give the Ukrainians whatever equipment they're asking for, because that is ultimately going to determine the outcome of this war.
My question around intelligence was just vis-a-vis the New York Times, who had reported at length this morning about the degree to which, and certainly never to take away from the Ukrainian contribution, which is, as you rightly point out, is driving all of this. But just my point was to ask you to reflect a little bit on the degree to which Western allies are integrated, both in the intelligence capacity, but also, as you say, with the supplying of weapons. It's still at a very high, the level of cooperation and support is still very high, even all these months out. And I'm wondering how important you think that is, and if you're surprised by it at all.
Well, it's crucially important, and frankly, given how this all started, we're in a totally different world now. I mean, at the very beginning, I can remember that Trudeau didn't want to supply any weapons to Ukraine. He was worried about escalating, and it wasn't too dissimilar with the U.S. Now we're at a point where the U.S. is giving HIMARS missiles and all sorts of very, very powerful and important military equipment, and whatever other support we can give them. I understand that there's Ukrainian troops training in a number of Western countries so that they can that the Ukrainian army can continue to have the manpower to fight and to rotate fresh soldiers in. There's really, at this point, every support from the West, and it's the right thing to do, because if we don't support the Ukrainians, we will personally, our own countries, NATO, will be at war with Russia. It's not their intention. It's not Putin's intention to stop at Ukraine. His intention is to keep on rolling. And so the Ukrainians are doing us an incredible service with their own casualties as a buffer to stop Russia from its global ambitions.
Okay, I'll leave it on that point. Thank you very much, Mr. Browder.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.